In 1891, Army Captain Dennis Mahan Michie shook hands with Navy star quarterback Worth Bagley after their game. 7 years later, both were dead, killed within weeks of each other in the Spanish-American War. This is how the Army-Navy rivalry was born. The first ever Army-Navy football game in 1890 shouldn't have happened. It existed only because one cadet, Dennis Mahan Michie, orchestrated a brilliant bit of deceit. When his friends at Navy issued a challenge, Michie, the son of a prominent West Point professor and Civil War veteran, convinced a skeptical West Point leadership that the pride of West Point was at stake. The academic board relented with one condition. The game had to be at West Point since cadets couldn't travel. All 271 members of the Corps of Cadets contributed 52 cents each to pay half of Navy's travel expenses. Michie served as captain, manager, and filled the role of coach, pulling together volunteers who had almost no football experience. Navy, the much more experienced team, arrived by ferry on November 29th. They then proceeded to demolish Army 24-0. Army got its revenge in 1891, winning 32-16, with Michie himself scoring a touchdown. That night, both teams attended a dance at the Navy boathouse. There, Michie shook hands with Navy's quarterback Worth Bagley and wished him well. It was a simple moment of sportsmanship between two fierce competitors. Years later, that handshake took on unbearable poignancy. During the Spanish-American War in 1898, Worth Bagley became the first naval officer killed during the conflict when a Spanish shell hit his torpedo boat, the USS Winslow. Just 7 weeks later, Captain Dennis Michie was killed by a Spanish marksman during the Battle of San Juan Hill. Two opponents on the gridiron, brothers in ultimate sacrifice, dying for the same flag within weeks of each other. Michie Stadium, West Point, bears his name. The rivalry's founder never lived to see his creation flourish, but this tragic full-circle moment established the foundational truth of the Army-Navy game. Opponents on the field, united in service. This wasn't just about football. It never was. The 1893 game marked the first appearance of the Navy goat mascot. The game itself proved so bitter and bloody that fights broke out among the 8,000 spectators. Following Navy's 6-4 victory, something happened that nearly killed the rivalry before it really began. A heated argument between an Army brigadier general and a Navy rear admiral regarding the game's outcome became so intense that one challenged the other to a duel. When news reached President Grover Cleveland's desk, he called a cabinet meeting and ordered both academies prohibited from playing each other. Specifically, he had his secretaries forbid each team from playing anywhere but their own grounds, so neither could leave their academies to play each other. The rivalry was suspended for 5 years, 1894 through 1898, the longest interruption in its history, a testament to how dangerously intense the rivalry had become in just its few first years. The game that had started with cadets pooling their spare change and both teams dancing together after had escalated to the point where senior military officers were willing to kill each other over the outcome. The game was interrupted again in 1909 following another tragedy. Army left tackle Eugene Byrne was buried at the bottom of a pileup during a game against Harvard with 10 minutes remaining. His neck was broken. He died the following morning at 6:35 a.m. with his grief-stricken father, Colonel John Byrne, a Civil War veteran, at his bedside. The West Point superintendent immediately canceled the remainder of Army's season, including the scheduled Army-Navy game. Byrne's funeral was held with full military honors, the entire Corps of Cadets in attendance. Theodore Roosevelt was Assistant Secretary of the Navy in 1897. He had personally lobbied for the game's reinstatement. He understood something crucial. The intensity was dangerous, yes, but it was also valuable. It was preparation, not for more football games, but for the real battles these young officers would face. In 1899, the game resumed at Franklin Field in Philadelphia, a neutral site solution that would host 90 of the first 124 games. Over 27,000 spectators attended, more than triple the volatile 1893 crowd, signaling the rivalry's growing national appeal. Army beat Navy 17-5, while Philadelphia became the traditional home roughly halfway between the two military schools and remained so for 126 years. In 1901, Roosevelt became the first sitting U.S. president to attend the game, establishing the tradition of switching sides at halftime to ensure impartiality and show support for both service academies. 10 sitting presidents would eventually attend this game, more than any other annual sporting event in American history. What had nearly destroyed the rivalry, its dangerous intensity, became its defining characteristic, channeled and controlled, but never eliminated. By the Roaring Twenties, the rivalry had outgrown the East Coast. To heal the lingering scars of the Great War, the academies agreed to a radical proposal. They would travel 800 miles west to Chicago. On November 27, 1926, the game wasn't played in a standard stadium. It was played in a monument. Over 110,000 spectators, the largest crowd in football history at the time, packed the newly dedicated Soldier Field. The venue was built specifically to honor the men who had fallen in World War I. This made the game a consecrated event before kickoff. Navy arrived undefeated. Army had lost only once. For 60 minutes, the two juggernauts traded blows in the mud. With the sun setting and the score deadlocked at 21-21, Navy lined up for a drop kick to win it. The ball sailed wide. The game ended in a draw. But the tie score was poetic. By taking the game to the Midwest, to a stadium built as a war memorial, the academies proved this was no longer just an Ivy League-adjacent skirmish. It was now a national institution. It was the first time the country realized that this game belonged to everyone. By 1944, World War II had transformed both academies into football powerhouses. The widespread induction of young men into the military gutted many civilian programs, while turning the service academies into rosters filled with the nation's best players. For the first time in the rivalry's history, Army and Navy entered their game ranked number 1 and number 2 in the nation. Demand for tickets was so immense that the game was moved from Navy's 12,000-seat stadium to Baltimore's Municipal Stadium. In a brilliant move that explicitly linked the contest to the war effort, the government mandated that every ticket holder must also purchase a $25 war bond. Tickets sold out within 24 hours, and the game ultimately raised $58.6 million for the war effort, equivalent to over $900 million today. Military dignitaries, including Army Chief of Staff General George C. Marshall, General Hap Arnold, and Admiral Ernest King, braved freezing temperatures among 66,000 attendees. Millions listened worldwide on radio, including soldiers on bases overseas. In St. Vith, Belgium, officers and enlisted men of the 2nd Infantry Division followed the play-by-play on a board. Before the game, Army coach Red Blake read his team a telegram from General Robert Eichelberger in the South Pacific. Win for all the soldiers scattered throughout the world. Army, led by future Heisman winners Felix Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis, Mr. Inside and Mr. Outside, won 23-7, clinching their first national championship since 1914. Blanchard, a 200-pound fullback nicknamed Doc because his father was a physician, became the first junior to win the Heisman Trophy in 1945. Davis, his running mate at halfback, finished second in Heisman voting in both 1944 and 1945 before finally capturing the trophy in 1946. Together, they scored 97 combined touchdowns from 1944 to 46 and became forever linked in college football lore. The victory prompted General Douglas MacArthur to send his now famous telegram from his Pacific headquarters. The greatest of all Army teams, stop "We have stopped the war to celebrate your magnificent success." MacArthur wasn't exaggerating. 2 weeks later, the Battle of the Bulge began. The 1944 to 1946 Army teams won 27 games with 0 losses and 1 tie across 3 seasons, winning 3 consecutive national championships and outscoring opponents by an average margin of 51-5. It remains one of the most dominant stretches in college football history. Both Blanchard and Davis went on to distinguished military careers. Blanchard became an Air Force colonel, flying combat missions in Korea and Vietnam. Davis served in Korea before a brief NFL career. Though they were never really that close personally, they remained inseparably bound by mutually extraordinary deeds. Football brought them together. Service defined them. Army's dynasty was coached by Earl "Red" Blake, who compiled a record of 121 wins, 33 losses, and 10 ties at West Point over 18 seasons. Known among players as the Colonel for his stern, disciplined approach, Blake coached all 3 of Army's Heisman winners. The 1951 cheating scandal that expelled 90 cadets, including 37 football players and his own son, Bob Blake, nearly caused him to resign. General Douglas MacArthur persuaded him to stay. He stayed and did the finest job of his life with the poorest Army team he ever had, wrote columnist Red Smith. During these war years, the game became more than a rivalry. It became a tangible link between the home front and the battlefront. It became proof that American spirit remained unbroken. It became, in the truest sense, America's game. Perhaps the most emotionally charged game in the rivalry occurred December 7, 1963, 15 days after President John F. Kennedy's assassination. Kennedy, a Navy veteran and PT 109 hero, was an avid football fan who had attended the 1961 and 1962 games, performing the coin toss. He had telegrammed Navy's coach on November 20th, 1963, "I hope to be on the winning side when the game ends." 2 days later, he was assassinated in Dallas. Roger Staubach, Navy's quarterback and 1963 Heisman Trophy winner, was leaving thermodynamics class when he learned Kennedy had been shot. Navy Captain Tom Lynch was in leadership and law class when the professor came into the room and said the president had died. It was just shocking. You were completely dumbfounded, and then you went numb. The game was initially postponed, with debate about canceling it entirely out of respect. However, at the insistence of Jacqueline Kennedy, the game was played on December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, 1 day after Kennedy's funeral. Life magazine had planned to feature Staubach on its cover, but the cover was changed to honor the fallen president. Navy coach Wayne Hardin, who had met Kennedy personally, told his team before kickoff, "Let's play a game worthy of a president. We have to celebrate his life." With 102,000 fans in attendance, the stadium was eerily quiet during warm-ups, but deafening once play began. Navy led 21-7 entering the fourth quarter, but Army quarterback Raleigh Stitchway drove for a touchdown and 2-point conversion, cutting it to 21-15. Army recovered an onside kick and drove to Navy's 2-yard line with seconds left. In the deafening noise, Stitchway repeatedly pleaded with the referee to stop the clock due to crowd noise. This time the timeout wasn't awarded and the clock expired. Navy escaped 21-15. "I really think there was a palpable sense of relief among everyone when the ball was finally kicked off," Lynch said later. "We'd been through 15 days of mourning. Playing the Army-Navy game brought some closure for America." The game also featured the first use of an instant replay in American sports broadcasting, though CBS aired it without warning viewers about the new technology. A nation grappling with a historical moment it wished it could rewind was introduced to a device that allowed for immediate re-examination of the past, although on a football field. Staubach won the Heisman Trophy by the 7th largest margin in the award's history. After graduating, he served 4 years in the U.S. Navy, including a tour in Vietnam as a Supply Corps officer before joining the Dallas Cowboys. He didn't play his first NFL game until age 27 as a rookie in 1969. Despite the late start, he led the Cowboys to 4 Super Bowls, winning 2, earned Super Bowl 6 MVP honors, and recorded 23 fourth-quarter comeback victories. His journey from Navy Heisman winner to Vietnam veteran to 2-time Super Bowl champion embodies the unique arc of service academy athletes. Years later, after the 2012 Army-Navy game, Army quarterback Trent Steelman botched a handoff on what would be the final play, fumbling away Army's chance to break an 11-game losing streak. Devastated, the first letters Steelman received were from the quarterbacks of that historic 1963 game, Raleigh Stitchway and Roger Staubach, rivals from 49 years earlier, offering support and gratitude. Stitchway had lost 26 classmates to Vietnam, including his best man, yet he and Staubach maintained a connection that transcended their on-field rivalry, exemplifying the brotherhood the game creates. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 fundamentally and permanently altered the meaning of the Army-Navy game. What had been, for many Americans, a nostalgic tradition steeped in the history of past wars became a contemporary and poignant reflection of the human cost of ongoing conflicts. The first Army-Navy game after the attacks, played December 1, 2001, drew the largest crowd ever to see a football game at Philadelphia's Veterans Stadium, despite both teams having terrible records. Army was 2-8, and Navy was 0-9. President George W. Bush attended, addressing both teams in their locker rooms before kickoff, speaking not of football but of the greater sense of purpose they now had to fulfill. For the players themselves, the attacks turned a theoretical commitment into stark reality. Army coach Todd Berry recalled his team receiving a standing ovation when they took the field against UAB. It was a sad commentary, he noted, that it took a national tragedy for the public to fully appreciate the sacrifice these young people were making. And then they started dying. 3 players from Navy teams that played in the early 2000s were later killed in action. Ron Winchester, class of 2001, J.P. Blecksmith, class of 2002, and Brendan Looney, class of 2004. Army quarterback Chase Presnecki was killed by an IED in Afghanistan in 2012. The rivalry has produced its share of heroes. Fewer than a dozen cadets and midshipmen who played Army-Navy football later earned the nation's highest military decoration. Don Hollader, Army's 1955 star, who was moved from end to quarterback his senior year, sacrificing personal statistics for team success, was killed by a sniper's bullet on October 17, 1967, during the Battle of Ong Thon in Vietnam. He received the Distinguished Service Cross. The powerfully built officer and father of 4 daughters was 33. West Point's athletic center bears his name. As the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan continued, the game took on a more somber dimension. The wearing of special uniform patches to honor specific military units or fallen alumni became tradition. In one year, Army players chose to wear the patch of the 173rd Airborne Brigade in memory of Chase Presnecki. Navy players wore a patch for the USS New York, an amphibious ship whose hull contained steel from the World Trade Center. The sacrifice became deeply personal. The game became a yearly touchstone for a nation at war and a moment to collectively honor the sacrifices of the current generation of service members. The abstract notion of service became tangible and immediate, as the players on the field were no longer just football players, but young men who would soon graduate into active war zones. Colin Ramos, a Navy linebacker and team captain, told CNN in 2024, "This game represents more than just us, the players. It's all the people that have come before us who have served this country. They've sacrificed their lives for this country." After the final whistle, when the battle is over and the victor has been decided, both teams walk to one end of the field. There they stand together, side by side, and face the student section of the losing team. As the band plays, victors and vanquished alike sing the alma mater of the defeated. Then the entire group crosses the field to the other side, turns to face the winning team's student section, and together they sing the alma mater of the victors. Since the winning team's alma mater is sung last, the phrase "sing second" has become synonymous with winning. The tradition demonstrates that while competition has its place on the football field, all these students are one team as part of the U.S. military. There's a story from the mid-1990s that captures everything this tradition represents. Army co-captain Jim Cantaloupe and Navy team captain Andrew Thompson faced each other 4 times from 1992 to 1995. Cantaloupe's Army teams defeated Thompson's Navy teams in 4 consecutive years. The total margin of victory across all 4 games was a mere 6 points. The final game in 1995 was particularly heartbreaking for Navy, ending in a 14-13 Army victory after a 99-yard drive by the cadets. In the midst of his team's wild celebration, Cantaloupe sought out his devastated counterpart. He found Thompson in a hallway of the stadium, and the 2 rivals embraced. Cantaloupe cried with him, gave him a big hug, and told him we would be brothers for life. Thompson later recalled the moment as an incredible act of class and goodwill that has stayed with him forever. The 2 have remained dear friends ever since, a living testament to the rivalry's deepest truth. The bonds forged through shared experience and mutual respect are more powerful than any outcome on a scoreboard. This tradition exists nowhere else in American sports because no other rivalry shares this fundamental reality. Tomorrow's opponents will fight together on tomorrow's battlefields. The 2024 season saw Army finish 11-2 and Navy 9-3, the first time both entered the game with winning records since 2017. Their combined 19 wins represented the most ever in the rivalry's 134-year history. The December 14th game drew 9.4 million television viewers on CBS, the highest viewership since at least 1990, breaking the previous record of 8.45 million from 1992. This represented a 31% increase over 2023 and rivaled NFL regional Sunday window ratings. Why does America still watch in such numbers? Because once a year we're reminded of what these young people are choosing. They're choosing service over self. They're choosing meaning over money, and they're choosing brotherhood over individual glory. Navy's Chet Gladchuk captured it perfectly. You're looking at the last frontier of amateurism before your eyes. The Army-Navy game endures because it represents something increasingly rare in American sports: authentic amateurism, genuine tradition, and competition rooted in something far larger than individual glory. These young men and women compete for pride, tradition, and service to country rather than NIL deals and portal opportunities. They know that when the game ends, regardless of the score, they're on the same team, America's team. Medal of Honor recipient Thomas Hudner participated in the 2010 coin toss to start the game. Hudner said about attempting to rescue downed pilot Jesse Brown in Korea, "I wasn't going to leave him there. What I had to do was clear." That ethos that you don't leave teammates behind defines this rivalry and separates it from every other game in college football. From Dennis Michie shaking hands with Worth Bagley in 1891 to Jim Cantaloupe embracing Andrew Thompson in 1995, the story remains the same. Opponents for 60 minutes, brothers for life, and sometimes brothers in ultimate sacrifice. That's why it's America's game. That's why it endures. And that's why, as long as these 2 academies exist, they will meet every December to compete, to honor those who came before, and to remind us all what service truly means. The history of this game is built on thousands of personal moments just like these. I'd be honored if you shared your own favorite Army-Navy memory, or perhaps a family story connected to the rivalry in the comments below. And if you love deep dives into the history of college football, I post new stories whenever I can. Please consider subscribing to the channel because you don't want to miss the next one. And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other history videos. And you might enjoy going to our website where you can click on the timeline feature and see series about the history of early American football or the history of offense. You can learn about the veer, the first triple option offense, or the history of the I formation.